All right, all right. Hello again, everyone. It's time for another edition of Drummer Nation Live, the show for and about drummers, where we talk about all things drum and drum related. I am absolutely drum related. I am absolutely elated to tell you this is the second week now ongoing that I have asked a great drummer and a great guy and a crazy man as well in all the best ways to be my co-host, and he's here today, and his name is Adam Nussbaum. Let me punch him up. Where are you, Adam? Come on. Oh, I got to get out of this box first. 1, 2. What in the world? Okay. Let's go. There we are. Hello, Adam.
Hey, everybody out there in cyber world. Hope you're all doing well.
And where do you live, Adam?
I'm in Easton, Pennsylvania.
Quick shot to the city?
You know, I'm about an hour and 15 minutes straight west from Manhattan.
No, that's close.
And
close.
Probably about an hour from Newark Airport, which was a prime consideration when I was thinking about this location.
Mm-hmm. You just have to be near an international airport, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be making domestic connections. That's when things seem to perpetually get messed up. So
right.
Have to try to take the path of least resistance.
All right. Well, the big news of the week we should start with, the most important news in the jazz music industry, is the passing of Wayne Shorter. And I know that's special to all of us, but what are your reflections on that?
Well, you know, Wayne was one of the great visionaries in this music. He was not only a wonderful tenor saxophonist, but he was probably one of the greatest composers to come along in this century. And he contributed so much to music. I mean, a lot of younger people are probably familiar with the group Weather Report. He was one of the founding members of that group. But before that, he had been associated with Miles Davis in the great quintet of the 60s with Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams. Before that, he was the musical director for Art Blakey's band for probably close to 4 years or so. And before that, he'd played with Maynard Ferguson. And he pretty much came on the scene in the late 50s. Mm-hmm. And just one of those people who was always looking for something new and had a great, just a great musician all around, and a very interesting human being. Was always interested in, science fiction and things beyond and other universes and things like that. And I think all that affected his music and what he brought to all of us, a continual searcher. Some people are great craftsmen and other people are visionaries, and he was one of those.
Absolutely.
So I'm just very grateful for the amount of music that he left. And thank goodness, these people, they leave the building, but they never leave because of what they've left here, and the spirits live on. So
absolutely
grateful for Wayne Shorter.
Also worth mentioning, of course, is his Blue Note recording contract. He has lots of disc out on the Blue Note label under his own name, and they have a litany of the greatest drummers of the time on those albums.
Absolutely. I mean, I grabbed them just to The first one he did was called Night Dreamer.
Mm-hmm.
And I see you got the reflection in there, but
I'll solo you.
that
There you
was a
go.
wonderful recording. And that featured Lee Morgan, who was his bandmate in Art Blakey's band,
Mm-hmm.
along with Coltrane's one time rhythm section of McCoy Tyner, Reggie Workman, and Elvin Jones. That's a great record. Then he did another one, which was a quartet record with the same basic group called Juju. These are all, to me, essential recordings. And then
Absolutely.
Speak No Evil, which combined having some of his bandmates from Miles' band, Herbie Hancock and Ron, along with Freddie Hubbard and Elvin.
And
And
Alvin. That might
the
be my favorite
composition,
one right there.
Speak No Evil. These are
Mm-hmm.
just, for me, these are indispensable recordings that you, if you're serious about the music and want to hear incredible playing, they cover it. And then
Required
there
listening.
was a few he did with the great drummer who's very often overlooked is Joe Chambers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the record Adam's Apple,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great record. There's another one with a larger ensemble called The All Seeing Eye. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also with Herbie and Ron, Joe Chambers, Freddie Hubbard, Gratian Moncourt, James Spaulding, and Wayne had an older brother, Alan Shorter, and he's on some of that. These are, these are indispensable recordings. And one that I have to show you that I think is one of the most ferocious records you'll ever hear with Art Blakey is this one.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Absolutely. It has the fire and intensity of a live gig, and it's in the studio. And you can hear the cats like yelling and screaming and hooting and hollering because
Well,
Art Blakey is on fire big time.
mm-hmm.
And if that's one of those indispensable records, you can't believe that what's going down.
The front line. I mean, look at the front line of the horn player. Well, the whole band. I mean, just amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, Art Blakey was graduate school for anybody that was worth a damn with the way they played. Everybody went through Art Blakey. Once you played with him, you had your degree. You were ready to hit it.
Mm-hmm. The Messengers.
One of the great band leaders ever.
Now he's got a slew of records on Blue Note as well. Art Blakey does some of with
Oh,
Wayne, and again required listing for everyone.
yeah.
Required listing. Um,
Yeah, Art was fantastic. I mean, when he had his own band, he was very much in the driver's seat. But then again, when you hear him on other records where he's a side man, he knew how to stay back and, give all the necessary support. And you'd
mhm.
never realize that he was such a commanding band leader from the drums, knowing how to shape the arrangements, knowing how to orchestrate everything. And really incredible because he came up playing in big bands
Right.
in the late 30s and 40s. So
Billy Eckstein and
I was I'm very curious to hear. There's an opera that Wayne Shorter had been working on, and I believe it did come out with Esperanza Spalding called Iphigenia, which was something that I'm really curious to hear. I hope it has been recorded and documented somehow. So
yeah, I haven't
his
heard that.
legacy will live on like any of the greats, and thank goodness we have the recorded medium so we can listen to this stuff.
Mm-hmm. I got to hear him play several times, and Blakey as well. And I just think it's important for drummers, young drummers, to go hear every great drummer that's alive during your lifetime. Sometimes you may
Absolutely.
only have a chance to hear him once or twice in your life, and you don't want to miss that. You just don't want to miss it.
Absolutely. There is no substitute for direct contact. There's nothing that replicates being in the room and feeling that energy and feeling the air moving. There's, as great as technology is.
Hmm.
There's ain't nothing like the real thing.
That's right. Moving warm air. And it's really them there. You're looking at it going, man, that's Art Blakey right in front of me. Or any of the greats. Could have been it was Sinatra or whomever. Anytime you can see a great, great, great artist, it's just astounding to have them in front of you, breathing the same air, moving that warm air through the room. There's nothing like it.
Absolutely. And within many disciplines, seeing an amazing dancer, being at a great play,
Yep.
uh, these things are all important, to get that exposure.
You
The
ever
experiences we have in life give us things that we can reflect and bring forth in our own experience.
you ever come out of a great concert or any of these other things you mentioned, play or dance, a museum, and you just don't want to talk. You know,
Oh,
whomever you're with, you just want them to. You don't have to say anything, man. You just got blown away by amazing artistic expression, and it's beyond. It's almost beyond words.
well, music expresses things that you can't express in words.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, people say,
And,
"Why do you
and
play
that's
with your
something.
eyes?" Go ahead.
Now, what were you going to say?
People say, "Why do you play with your eyes closed?" A lot of musicians play with your eyes closed. Well, there's some things your heart was meant to see. You know.
I feel once you trust the people on the bandstand and there's that level of communication, that's when I may close my eyes. But I'm
Hmm.
usually trying to pay attention to everything every second.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm looking around, I'm
Yeah.
watching, I try to watch the bass player, see how he's articulating,
Well, the flip side of
watch
that
the
is they
horn
say
player.
they say you're supposed to read the music, watch the conductor at all times, and still check out the people in the audience and have a good
Well,
time.
I try to get away from the paper as quickly as possible
Right. Right. Well, that's
because
from
I,
being.
I don't want to have anything disturbing the ability for things to come out. If I'm
Mhm.
looking at something, I may not be listening as well as I can. So
And that comes
I
from
know
being
some
prepared.
people, yeah,
You know,
I know
like there's
some
a
people are amazing sight readers and can do that. And I'm not quite one of them,
well,
but I
there's a
have great
story.
respect for
There's an
that.
amazing story. I think it was Stan Getz on Woody's band, if I have, or maybe Stan Kenton's band. That the second night he turned his stand around. And it wasn't that he had memorized the parts on the first night. It's that he knew the music, man. He knew it before he got there. He knew
I think it's important to be prepared. Do your homework.
it. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
always like knowing if I'm going into a situation, I want to get to the caper. I don't want to be looking at the paper.
There it is. An A bomb. We should call him an atom bomb or an A bomb. I like him. You got tons of them. Oh, all
Being
right. You were telling.
prepared, man.
Yeah, yeah. Scout motto. You were telling me also about a Sonny Rollins book you're getting involved in reading.
Oh man, this is a incredible document. It's not only a great document about Sonny, but it also gives great historical information about the times and things that were going on. And this is a big book here.
Yeah.
How far am I now? Yeah,
You're
I'm getting
four
near the
fifths.
end.
Yeah, you're pretty close to the end. I'll
Yeah,
have to
but
pick that up.
I mean, Sonny Rollins, this is one of the greatest improvisers ever,
Hmm.
and such a amazing inspiration and the ability of just being creative and improvising. And
Hmm.
what can you say? This is
These are our American
he's
heroes.
he is one of the greats. I mean, yeah, God bless him.
Hmm. And he's still with us, right?
Yeah, he just turned 92 in September.
You talk to him
And he
sometimes?
hasn't been playing the past few years because I know he had some respiratory issues.
Hmm.
But he's hanging in there, and what can you say about this
Yeah.
man?
God bless him. Thank the world that he's still here, and what he's done for
Yeah,
music.
yeah.
Did you know him or work with him at all?
Well, I used to go listen to him whenever I could. I remember the first time I heard him, I was in high school. I drove down from Connecticut with some friends and heard him at the Village Vanguard. And that was pretty amazing. And he was playing with a wonderful piano player, very respected amongst the musicians, not known enough with the public. His name was Albert Daly from Baltimore, great piano player. And Larry Ridley was playing bass, and the drummer was from New Orleans, a wonderful drummer named David Lee.
Oh, I don't
And
know.
I heard them in '72. And then, one thing happened after another. I got Sonny somehow got my number in the mid '70s and called me because he'd heard about me and he was auditioning drummers. So I went down. I think I was 21 or 22, and needless to say, I was completely in awe of this person.
Mm-hmm.
And he was checking out different drummers, different piano players, different combinations. Okay, now we're going to do a calypso, and now let's change it up and let's play a ballad. And, you know, that went on for a few days. And I didn't get the gig at that point, but I managed to get a call from him a few months later, and I did a weekend with him. And I
Oh,
was, completely freaked. I'm
really?
just, it's like you're a kid and you're with somebody who's beyond an icon. Yeah, I couldn't really believe it. But he was a very sweet man. And it was a learning experience. I mean, like so many situations I've been in, when I got in at a young age, I wish I could go back now and do it with the experience that I have. And now that I have a little better idea about what I'm trying to do here.
I'm sure
But I
it's
learned so much
excellent.
from these people because,
Mm-hmm.
just, any of the great musicians, first of all, they have an amazing sound that they can just
Right.
generate themselves.
Giant sound he had.
Excuse me?
A giant sound he had.
Oh, unbelievable sound.
Enormous.
And,
Yeah.
this guy was strong. I mean, he worked out a lot. He took very good care of himself. He grew up in the era when there was a lot of issues going on with abuse of different things along the way, but he got himself together, got himself clean.
Mm-hmm.
And he's somebody who's been a perpetual searcher. He's always looking to improve. He's somebody who's continually dissatisfied with things that he's done. And a lot of the recordings and things that we all love, he was never happy with them. I guess that's why he kept getting better and better.
Well, you know the story about the bridge, right? I mean, he had an album named The Bridge, but at some point he decided he wasn't good enough and he would practice, and it wasn't with that sound. The place he could go to practice was out on the bridge. Well, which bridge?
Oh, yeah.
Brooklyn Bridge or one of the bridges? And he
It
would
was
not
the
go.
Williamsburg Bridge.
There you go. And he'd be out there practicing all night long because he wasn't
Yeah, he'd be out
good
there. And,
enough in
he
his
was
mind.
somebody. What was fascinating about him was when he was given so much acceptance and being thrown so many accolades by the public and the pundits, he was like, I don't feel good about what I'm doing. It's not happening, man. I need to get away and get this together. And
Amazing.
just to have that kind of work ethic,
Mm-hmm.
where he's like at the top of the food chain and he's like, I'm not worthy, I'm trying to get better. He's still hearing in his head the people that inspired him,
Mm-hmm.
Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster, Lester Young, Charlie Parker. I mean, this is a great example of somebody who's been diligent and working at the craft and just showed his sense of humility
Mm-hmm.
at trying to consistently improve. And when you hear this guy play, he's not just playing licks and vocabulary. He's truly improvising off the songs, and he'll he'll come off the melody, he'll start to work off ideas from that. He may start to go off on the yellow brick road and go out into outer space, and then he'll come back and he'll hit earth again and refer back to that tune, get recharged, and find another way to do it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, for me, one of the greatest improvisers that we've ever heard. And it's not a home run every time, because he's not just trying to be a Xerox of things that he's done or just running vocabulary. He's really trying to improvise.
Mm-hmm.
And you take a risk when you do that.
Absolutely. People don't remember there are times when Cezanne left the painting in the field.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
So this book is it's amazing. I mean, you can see, he's looking in those eyes. He's still
yeah,
looking for something.
yeah, it's good. And you mentioned his strength. What's that video where he's playing on a stage in Europe somewhere? He jumps off the stage and breaks his foot and keeps playing.
That was up in Saugerties, New York.
Oh, okay, New York. And I mean, you can't
Yeah.
hear that he hurt himself. He just jumps off the stage like, I don't know, 8 feet or something onto concrete, and he just keeps playing. Broke his
He's a
foot.
one in a row.
One in a
There's
row.
there's not too many like him. They changed the game. These guys changed the game. He's a
Right.
perfect example of somebody who studied everything behind him. He
Mm-hmm.
had firm foundations,
And incorporated.
having yeah, and I mean, he stands on the shoulders of the people that came before him, and he went from being a conglomerate to being a signature, like a lot of people do as such.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
But
there's
I
certain
mean,
artists, you just hear them and you right away you realize they're unique individuals that don't sound like anybody else,
yeah.
you know,
I
in
mean, in
most,
the
many
beginning,
genres.
you hear people, and certain people come on the scene and they're a signature identity.
Right.
And
Right.
a lot of people come on the scene and they're a conglomerate of their influences. But then over time, with experience and playing, they become an identity where they are identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
So I
You
think
know,
that's something which doesn't happen with that many people.
right, right. There's a great thing in, there's I think it's called Satchmo. It's a PBS thing Gary Giddens did on Louis Armstrong. And in the end, there's a spot with Wynton Marsalis, and he's saying, a lot of people look, everybody plays West End blues and all that stuff, but he said the stuff later in Lewis's life is almost impossible to transcribe and recreate because the level of nuance, the depth of sophistication, the tiny things of his personality are impossible to replace, to imitate. And he says the important thing he said was some people look at technique as velocity or what we call chops, and he says the ultimate expression of technique is nuance, which I thought was spot on.
I mean, how much can you do with one note?
Right.
And that's what I love when I hear some of the blues players. It's not talking about speed or shred.
Right.
It's about how much you can take one note and create a story with one note. And that's something where, like you said, nuance is very difficult to transcribe. Just like you can transcribe information, but you can't transcribe feel.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a
Um,
hard thing. And I think it's important to me, it's about getting a feeling of expression. I mean, where you feel some emotion.
mm-hmm.
And it's hard to feel a lot of emotion if you're playing so many notes you can't even breathe.
And drummers,
It's a
we
certain intensity.
drummers have that problem, routinely because we don't have to stop playing to breathe. Piano players, certain instruments where you're not blowing air through it. We all learned a phrase by listening to people who do, right?
I mean, guitar, piano, and drums are the prime
Mm-hmm.
violators.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to learn what gives your notes their value are the spaces around them.
Right.
Just like if somebody is speaking to you and they're running their mouth and they're nonstop with something they're saying, you don't have time for it to digest. But if somebody goes, "Hey, Mike, I got to talk to you about something,"
You got my attention. That's right. That's right.
and
The
you
look, the
leave
intensity. Hmm.
that space puts weight on what you say.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating process. It's interesting. It's when you're young, you're just trying to accumulate things, and as you get older, it's a constant process of editing.
Right. And it's a lot
I mean,
easier.
look at all the stuff we accumulate, all the gear we accumulate.
Hmm.
Being drummers, having a lot of cymbals, a lot of drums,
All
right?
this junk
And
behind
then
me.
at a
Yeah.
certain point, it's like, yeah, then what are you going to do with all this stuff? How much do you need?
A friend of mine told me you have aging drummer syndrome, Michael. I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, I know there were times when you had 3 or 4 kits working in a day. And there were years where I did 300 dates a year. But now I have all this stuff. I'm 67. I don't need that anymore. You know, you know how if you play theater shows, every show you play, you buy something else because you don't have a train whistle or some
Yeah,
stupid thing.
right.
And you end up with, I don't play percussion. I got congas and bongos and cajones and djembes and they don't mean anything to me, and 5 or 6 drum sets and 15 snare drums. And I used them all as a pro, but not anymore. You know, I'm never going to use all that stuff again, but I don't want to get rid of it.
I know. I know the feeling,
Yeah, we're all
man.
in the
I
same
hear
boat.
you. Yeah.
I ended up
I
after I
mean, I
sold
had
my
a
cymbal company, I have 50 cymbals. 50 cymbals.
yeah,
I mean, how many you
I
need?
had a
6?
student come over the other day, and he was saying, "Man, I really need a cymbal. My cymbal doesn't sound that good." And he said, "Can I buy one from you?" And I said, "Well, I can't sell you anything that was given to me because
Right.
that's not good karma." I said, "I'll let you use it. It's yours to use, but it's not yours to sell. And if you don't like it,
Give it back.
come back and maybe, we'll find something else."
Yes. And so did Mel do that for you? I think Mel was one of your uh,
Well,
supporters as a
Mel
young man.
Mel laid me on to some stuff one time, which was crazy. I couldn't believe it. I was playing a gig with John Schofield at a club called Paulson's that was up on 72nd Street between West End and Amsterdam, between Broadway and Amsterdam. And Mel came to the gig that night, and I knew him a bunch, and I wasn't really that close to him at that point, but he came in, and at that point, I was playing a walnut set of Gretsch from the early 70s, and I had some old K's, and I was using the calf head on the snare drum and the bass drum. And I saw him. I said, "Hey, Mel, come and sit in, play a tune." And it was Michael Moore was playing bass,
Yes, yeah.
wonderful bass player. And I think Steve Swallow was out of town because we had a very nice trio. And so Mel sat in, and then after the gig, Mel said to me, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, I'm loose. What's happening?" He goes, come over at 12. So he gave me his address on West End Avenue. I went up there, I rang the bell. He came down to the lobby, goes, "Come with me." And I go, "What's going on?" He goes, "Come with me." So he brings me down to the basement where he has a storage facility,
Mm.
and he gives me a snare drum and a floor tom that totally matched my kit. Same vintage, same hue of walnut stain. I
Wow.
said, "Mel, what's going on?" He goes, "Man, they stole the small tom and the bass drum, and this matches your stuff perfect. You take it." I'm going, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm using Slingerlands now, so it's not doing me any good." It was so generous of him,
Yeah.
and he was one of those people. If he liked you, he really liked you. If he didn't
Hmm.
like you, forget it.
Well, I went through New York once and called him just out of the blue. And I had studied with Hamilton, who he likes. And man, he gave me like an hour on the phone. He didn't know me from Adam. Just
Yeah,
couldn't have been more generous about it, his time.
yeah. I mean, these cats, they could detect sincerity, I guess, and a passion
I think that's it.
for this.
Are you real about it,
And
or are you just trying to pick my brain for a tidbit, or is this something that means something to you? I think that goes a long way with students and teachers.
yeah, I mean, Mel was very, very supportive. I mean, he saw me, he dug my beat, you know, he liked
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I liked a similar sound that he did. He also said, and we're from the same tribe,
Yeah,
because we were both Jewish.
yeah.
And
Um,
he was a, it's amazing how much recording and stuff he did.
oh yeah,
And to think that he was, just barely 60 when he passed away.
hmm
And, just how much work that he did and how great he made every band he was in sound.
absolutely. But he was also an
And
enthusiastic supporter of young talent, and that would be around that time. You and Hammer and Dennis McCrell, John Riley,
Kenny
uh,
Washington,
Kenny
Danny
Washington,
Gottlieb.
Danny Gottlieb. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those guys cite Mel as not only a great influence, but a great supporter and encourager of their careers.
Mentor,
Mentor,
a
yeah.
mentor.
Yeah.
One wonderful.
hmm
Yeah, he was something else, man. That's for sure. I'm glad I had time to hear him a lot. I'd go up to the pad. He'd be sitting in his big armchair. He'd be playing different records he was on. And then he would be telling me to bring stuff I was on
Oh, that's
and
great.
just listening to stuff and just hanging out,
I got to hear
hanging
him
out with some of the.
a few times, and I hung out on the phone twice with him. So I loved him. He was great. So we got some places to go here. You want to talk about some of your music, or you want to look at some of these videos? And I got 1 minute videos with we can reflect on. What do you want to do?
That would be fun.
Well, let's do some of that then. Um,
Sure.
so just to explain what this is, I've been doing interviews for like 6 years, like 300 of them, and I got tired of hearing my own voice, really, and I wanted some help and somebody who I respected and trusted and knew
You
was
could
great.
try some different voices,
Yeah, right.
Mike,
And that's why I
You
got
could try
Adam to
like
help me.
Frank Leon.
But what I did now that TikToks and shorts and reels and these vertical things are popular is I went back through some of these interviews and I would find something they said that was I thought was important or interesting and reduce it to a minute. And you put them up so you can look through 10, 12 of them, and it's 10 or 12 minutes. And everybody's got a little nugget of something truthful. So let's see what we got here.
My approach with the ride cymbal was to be able to swing the whole band from just a ride cymbal. I remember doing a gig in New York some years ago at this little club called Bradley's, and Billy Higgins came in the club, and I'm playing, and Higgins used to always call me Baby Boy. So I'm playing, and I hear something behind me. Yeah, I hear you, Baby Boy. I hear you. And I look up, and there's a stick on my ride cymbal. So of course I slide out the way. He sits down. Within 8 bars, the music had gone to such a level, I was sitting there crying, literally crying. People were coming over to me, man, are you cool? I said, man, just listen to Higgins, man. Listen to Higgins. I mean, it was just crying from joy because Higgins had so much love in his playing.
All right, that's Carl Allen. I'm sure you know him. What are your thoughts?
Amen. Billy Higgins, man.
Amen. Yeah. But
This was a magical individual. He knew anybody that played with him. He was playing so much for them, and he could get so inside the music, and his cymbal beat and the transparency of his sound was fantastic. I mean, just with the cymbal alone, I mean that's a study for anybody who's trying to play this music.
right.
Everybody's got a different way of playing the ride cymbal, different touch, different sound, where the duh is in relation to the ding. And to me, Higgins is a modern. He's built upon the traditions that are coming from like Kenny Clark, where it just felt so good, man. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and when you see Billy too, man, he had this smile.
Right.
And it was infectious, man. What he could bring to the band was magical, and he was very, very supportive. I remember I was doing a workshop one time at, I think, a Jan or PAS or something, and Higgins happened to walk in the room, and he goes, "Man, you're saying some good stuff there." And there's nothing better than when you get that validation from your mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And just that way to give you that encouragement, man. That was wonderful. And Carl's a wonderful exponent of this music, and I know he's involved now at one of the schools in Kansas City,
Right.
and they're very lucky to have him.
I hope they realize how lucky they are to have Carl there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good man. We've
Hang on,
and,
are you rubbing your mic or something? I'm hearing.
is it okay now?
Yeah, it's not fine now. But say that last sentence again.
No, I mean we're all very grateful to have been able to play with the elders and had this time with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's another guy I know you know, and I know you know his playing. This is Marty Morell.
My last
Yeah.
year in high school, bass player introduced me to the Bill Evans Trio. Okay, and he played me Portrait in Jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard that changed my life. They created this new rhythm section concept of interplay, where each musician had their own voice, melodically and rhythmically. Right? They weren't just like chugging along, like keeping time. Right? And that was kind of the beginning of the new modern rhythm section. It became more of a conversation within the rhythm section. They were just kind of taking, what Scott LaFaro started, and Scott LaFaro and Paul Motion, what they started. We, stayed in that vein and tried to, imitate that and take from that and just take it a few steps further.
Marty Morell. The thing I asked him was that ever discussed on the bandstand? That rhythm section concept he's talking about? And he said, no, never, not a word.
Well, I think the reason that he was one of the people involved with Bill was, like we were talking about before, he was prepared with what had happened before in that music.
Right.
Marty came in. He was in there with Eddie Gomez.
He was in there with Eddie Gomez. The second trio, I think they call it.
Well, the first one was with Scotty and Paul.
Right.
Then after Scotty passed away, there was Chuck Israel. Chuck Israels was in there.
Mm-hmm.
There was also Larry Bunker had been in there as well. Great
mm-hmm.
drummer.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary Peacock, Chuck Israels were in there for a minute. Larry Bunker, Gomez. I mean, they understood the kind of conception
mm-hmm.
that had happened before.
And
what's also very interesting,
go ahead,
is when you hear Scott LaFaro in situations outside of Bill's group, he didn't play the way that he played with Bill with other people.
Mm-hmm.
If he had to be more functional playing as a four to the bar bass player, he fulfilled that role. Bill's thing was opening up more of an interplay counterpoint kind of situation. And you also had to have a drummer that knew how to bob and weave with that and be able to support those things going on with the conversational aspect that was happening primarily with the harmony and things like that and rhythms with Bill and whoever the bass player was. Eddie continued what happened with Scotty. Mark Johnson did a wonderful job being involved in that situation.
Yep.
Yeah, it was each trio seemed to have something.
And that trio with Mark Johnson had Joe LaBarbera in it, who we're going to hear from next. Let's hear from Joe.
First of all, what you're going to do is you're going to learn from some of the masters. You're going to check out Philly and Max and Roy and Shelley and Tony, and you're going to hear how their melodic approach fits the music. But then along with that, I also insist that they listen to other instrumentalists, to listen to how someone on another instrument creates melodically with their instrument, and how can we apply that to the drum set. Now you can illustrate the point to them and maybe drive the point home by saying you need to build a little bit of breath into what you're doing, because you don't need to actually breathe to produce your sound. You have to breathe just to stay alive, but you can play notes wall to wall. But now let's listen to what it sounds like when you put a little air in there, and that really cool idea you just played has a minute or two or a second or two to resonate, and now you can go on from there.
Some of the things we touched on earlier.
It's fascinating when you hear a lot of different people basically saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Same thing in different ways.
And these are all things that happen over time. And these are things that are necessary. I mean, I know for me, somebody who I love a great deal, the guitarist John Scofield, he used to listen a lot to the trumpet player Woody Shaw. Mm. And he said, man, if I can play some of those ideas that he's doing on the trumpet, on the guitar, he was playing certain things that were, not customarily being played. Woody kind of had his own way of dealing with vocabulary and was dealing with pentatonics and things like that. He kind of took some of what Coltrane was doing on the saxophone, put it on the trumpet. So as a guitar player, if you're playing something that comes from a trumpet player, you don't sound like, you don't want to copy something exactly from somebody that plays the same instrument you do.
Right.
It expands the horizons for what you do. I mean, I love listening to Sonny Rollins to get inspiration. Listen to Marvin Gaye's phrasing, listening to Shirley Horn or Billie Holiday, or hear how they approach things and try to bring some of that to the drums.
Oddly enough, in Miles's autobiography, he talks about learning how to phrase from Frank Sinatra.
And Frank would say that he got a lot of what he got from Tommy Dorsey.
Tommy Dorsey, absolutely. And he did. So that's how it works. That's the legacy, man. You learn from the people before you, and you try to, try for adequacy. Every now and then on a good night, I have delusions of adequacy. Let's do one more. And this is you got something? Okay, here we go. Basie, classic example, iconic band leader. If anybody else stood up and kicked off that tune, it's kind of a different band, isn't it?
Right. Exactly right.
How does that happen?
Listen, I don't know, because sometimes we'd go to some place like Vegas to one of the big rooms, and we'd have an afternoon rehearsal. Now we're in there with the rehearsal would start maybe at 1 o'clock, and we're reading down the chart with the music director. Then at 1:30 or 2, Basie and whoever the star was would maybe come on in. And when Basie entered the room, the band sounded different. Basie called me the governor. And that's why he gave me free reign. I was the governor, and he never, it was like I take care of the little things, he'd take care of the big things, and the big things never came up. It was always on me to do it.
In a big band, the drummer is sort of the de facto leader, don't you think?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
We're all going to get blamed on it anyway, so we might as well be right. Might as well take the credit. Interesting there, huh?
Gotta love him, man.
Oh yeah, Harold Jones. Sometimes I hear a great college band, and I think, man, they're in tune, they're phrasing correctly, everybody's doing their gig, but there's something missing, and what it is the leader. The leader puts, like you said, Basie stands in front of the band. It's a different band than if anybody else stood in front of it. I don't know how they do that.
It's fascinating. There's that old line, which is true. A band is no better than its drummer. but a band leader will kind of set up the vibe for where
Mhm.
things can go.
Mhm.
Some band leaders will give you a green light. Some of them got you that flashing yellow light, and a few band leaders may even put a red light up there. But
They
it's
can't. Don't do that.
yeah. I mean, I love the fact that Basie's band. What's incredible is from the 30s, the constant element were two things: Basie and Freddie Green.
Yeah.
And you think of and they used to call Freddie Green Father Time. I mean, this was a guitar player who never took a solo.
Right. Integral
All he
part of that
wanted to do
sound.
was just give that thing, man. And I heard Harold speak. Sometimes they'd be so together, they were just one thing. Freddie and you think of all the wonderful drummers that Basie had, and the band basically had the same vibe and feel. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact of Basie and Freddie Green being there. I mean, you had Joe Jones, you had Gus Johnson, you
Mhm.
had Sonny Payne, you had Rufus Jones, you had Harold Jones, you had Butch Miles, you had Hamilton. I mean, you had all these different cats. Ed Shaughnessy did some recordings too. And the band still's got that vibe. And I think it was Basie. And we gotta put Mr. Green in there as well.
I agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah, I've spoken to
Yeah,
some of the
yeah.
drummers who did that gig, and they looked at Freddie as the glue in the rhythm section. He was
Oh
the key.
man. I mean, this guy. And it frustrates me a lot of times when I'll go to jam sessions and sometimes and got guitar and piano. Now,
Hmm.
Basie played very sparsely. In a
Right.
big band, you don't need to play much. He played very little. And Freddie, he knew how to play under. He wasn't too loud. He was in the sound, not over
Hmm.
the sound.
Right.
And sometimes I hear guitar players, they feel compelled to play four to the bar. And it's like, you know how hard that is to really get it in the time and to
Hmm.
get in the music where it's not cluttering things or interfering with other things. And then you got a piano player who's real active. It's too much information.
Right.
What ends up happening is, like we said, the air goes away. And here's another one of my little lines: fire needs air.
Another A bomb.
There we go.
There you go.
So, man, we good for today?
Yes, I was just going to say, let me do one more quick one. This is a few seconds. It's kind of comical, and then we'll
Okay,
be done.
cool.
It finally dawned on me, this whole thing of DuPont and development of Mylar and getting involved in making a membrane that plays is really historic. That sucker is really historic. And how the hell I ever got in the way, I don't know.
That's Rainbow being modest, a true visionary, a
That's
pioneer.
fantastic that you have that.
Well, it's. I'll tell you how I got it. I was working for Steve Bryan, who owns Classic Drummer magazine, and he's a legit magazine media guy, and he knows the little secrets like you keep the camera rolling. So this interview was over, and we were sitting down, and he had stood up. But as long as we were there, they kept the camera rolling, and that's how we got that little gem. It's the best part of the interview, and it's nothing I asked him. But what a visionary, right?
Plastic. Yeah, Calf has a great, unique sound. There's no doubt about it. There's an earthiness to it,
Right.
but it's very, very temperamental
Hmm.
because it's so affected by the elements. The old snare drums used to have the door so you could put a light in and dry the head out, and then, you know, Davey Tough would take a sponge and just moisten the bass drum head to get away the ring. So when the weather could be humid, the bass drum sounds great. The snare drum's like playing on a wet diaper, you know. And then when it's super dry, the snare drum sounds nice and crisp, and the bass drums all over the place. So finding that happy medium, yeah, man.
Remo did it. Yeah. And he was always a
Yep.
visionary. You know, I met him. I was at Remo, the facility, later in Remo's life, and I was talking to Brock, you know, who was the president, and you could see that Brock was the nuts and bolts guy, and Remo was the. And I asked Remo about this. You're more interested in the creative aspect, and he said, yeah. He was walking around with something around his neck that they were giving away. It was a tambourine kind of thing that was part of the Rose Bowl parade that they sponsored, and he was thrilled with that. I don't think he gave much. I'm sure he was a great businessman, but he wasn't as motivated by the numbers as he was by the music and the products and the art, that side of it. I'm proud
Well,
to have
I
known
think
him.
that was a similar thing with Armin Zildjian.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He
Yeah,
loved the music,
he loved those
and he
drummers
tried to
too.
create. Yeah, and he tried to create things that drummers would be happy to play and help
Mm-hmm,
to serve the music. I
mm-hmm.
mean, that's our job, man. We get as a drummer, we're there to serve the music. What's the music tell us to play?
And even as a manufacturer, you know, I had both sides of that. I had a cymbal
Sure.
company, and we had a vision of what that should be. Maybe it wasn't for
Amen.
everybody, but we had a palette in mind. All right, man. This is Adam
Cool.
Nussbaum, my new co-pilot here, and I'm delighted that he's taking it on to join me. We're going to do them every other week or so. We're not tied to a given
This is
schedule.
fun, man.
I love having you here, Adam. And next
Well,
time we'll
thank
start
you.
with some of your recordings, and we'll dig into your style.
Oh no.
I can take it if
Hey,
you can.
I strongly recommend this book. This is an incredible book. And those of you out there, check out some Wayne Shorter. This was really an amazing musician, and you'll get something from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, Adam. Thank you very much. I'm gonna wrap
Michael,
things up here.
thank you, man. Have a great week. Everybody out there in cyber world, stay well. Aloha.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, man.